you are the sun just blows everything away. I mean, there's really no comparison, and in fact, any source of energy that you might compare to a traditional source or a renewable source like water, geothermal, hydroelectric, sun. These are all fundamentally mass production of electricity, and harvesting doesn't even come close. You're talking orders and orders and orders of magnitude less energy that you can harvest compared to the sun. But keep in mind, imagine walking along on a dark street and the phone running out of power, and your house might have a ton of energy to supply, but when you are alone and cut off from a source of energy, perhaps a source of energy like that would convert human body's motion to power to trickle charge your phone, or just convert your body's heat source to some sort of power, or even if you had a little unit, hand cranked unit to charge your phone. In those circumstances, that could be a very significant source of energy. The other way to look at it is, instead of having a charger that's constantly plugged to your wall, that's converting 110 volts to maybe 12 volt DC, wasting energy and charging your phone, if you're in your office and you happen to have a high efficiency panel behind your phone, or something that can charge your phone, that's a completely different market and application you're talking about. You'll notice that some of the newest phones have motion processors. There's lots that being done with vibrations, with ambient heat, with RF Wi-Fi signals. RFID is a technology that uses that's a passive device, and therefore you can come up with a variety of applications that either use these small amounts of energy, and the difference between a wall plug and these small amounts of energy is typically that the wall plug has you tethered to a certain point, whereas a harvesting process is designed to utilize whatever energy you can have in that moment without being constrained to a specific location, and that could be invaluable for search and rescue, for certain very specific applications.
So last question, because I'm going to have to run to a class. Why is it that you care about this? Why is it important? And feel free if you want to talk about just things in your history, your history that make you care about this, or just in general, it's fine.
I think that semiconductor physics in general is very fascinating. It's very unique, and what we do brings together many different fields. You need to be a material scientist, you need to be a microscopist, you need to be a device physicist, you need to be a person who can do thermal models, you need to be someone who's good at optics, so you can figure out how to get more light into your solar cells. So it's almost 6, 7, 8 disciplines, and with PV entering organics and polymers, now there's even more diversity in the area, and I think that the location that we are at, which is New Mexico, has one of the highest solar insolation compared to any other spot on Earth. It goes back to a conversation I had with a professor at Stanford, who said that at the beginning of about 40, 50, 60 years ago, there was hardly anything around. There was no Silicon Valley. There was nothing. But certain faculty members in Stanford recognized the potential of the place and decided to invest their time and energy to build a very strong department. And now you have the ecosystem around it, where you have the Silicon Valley with Stanford contributing significant amounts of intellectual efforts towards the Silicon Valley enterprise. Now I think that looking at New Mexico, what you realize is that there are some problems in water, which is not that abundantly available. But when it comes to sunlight, there's no issue. And the Rio Grande Valley could be very similar to the Silicon Valley in the next 10, 20, 30 years. It could fundamentally change the economy of the state, and it could fundamentally change the economy of the country as we start to harvest more energy and become more energy independent and also not contribute to global warming. So I think that it behooves us to recognize this opportunity and train students today so that you can have entrepreneurs 5, 10, 20 years from now pushing solar, and I think that puts us on a very solid footing for a very strong economy in the coming future.
That's fantastic. I know I do have to go, but I have to ask you another question because it's so interesting. So talking about the global warming, what are the issues in terms of, I mean, I imagine that manufacturing these things, and I know that manufacturing, for example, chips is very water intensive. You know, what needs to happen for this to be actually the manufacturing process to...
Right. So that's a very, I would, not to criticize the question itself, but that is a short-sighted approach to technology. And a story that so I'm part of this Quest ERC, which is also has to do with solar cells, and a very interesting story that the PI there, Professor Hansberg, told us once was Manhattan at a century ago, and this was when cars hadn't been invented, and they were just horses and buggies, and the amount of horse dung piling up in Manhattan was getting to be phenomenal. And so this was threatening the expansion of Manhattan. It was threatening a lot of economic development in Manhattan, and it was then decided to come up with comprehensive strategies to figure out how to get rid of this dung, and that was the problem of the day. Now you fast forward 10, 20, 25 years, that problem was non-existent because you had cars. Now at that point you could say that cars polluted, and cars are fundamentally dirty machines, but in 25 years you got a cleaner solution. Today's cars are way more advanced than cars that were manufactured a century ago, and cars that will be manufactured 50 years from now will be almost completely energy, it's not going to pollute the earth at all. As the manufacturability issue always looks massive when you're making incremental steps. So when you go from an internal combustion engine to the first lithium-ion battery-powered hybrid cars, one could always make the argument that the lithium-ion hybrid car is way more polluting to manufacture than an internal combustion engine. But then you are not paying attention to laws like the Moore's law in microprocessors, which means that once a capitalistic economy is given a technology, it will find a way over time to reduce the cost, to reduce the pollution, and it will make a much better product. Will it happen in one iteration? No, it would probably take 25 to 30 iterations. But if you don't buy that hybrid car, then how would you expect to get the perfect recyclable, cleanest car possible in 25 years? It won't happen because people chose not to support the R&D. And that's a key thing to remember. Change comes in steps. If we could just go from the dirty internal combustion engine to a car that is 100% recyclable and takes minimal amount of energy to manufacture from battery to components, then I'm sure, yes, we do that, but that's not going to happen. So you have to invest time and effort, and the trend of global warming will be reversed very slowly. I don't think you can, and it's probably being reversed as we speak, but you cannot shut a process like this off overnight because there are economical implications and technological implications associated.
Thank you.
Right.
Yeah, thanks. That's some really, I mean, that was a really fascinating response to that question.